Now remember, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about ancient gods, ancient peoples, and ancient religions. So let's pass over a lapse of years and then contemplate the condition of these nations in whom religion had been first born. And we'll find the Egyptians adoring the most common of plants, the most contemptible of beasts, the most hideous of reptiles. The solemnity and pomp of their absurd ceremonies held them up to the ridicule of the entire world. Clemens of Alexandria describes one of their temples. The walls shine with gold and silver and with amber and sparkle with the gems of India and Ethiopia, and the recesses are concealed by splendid curtains. But if you enter the penetralia and inquire for the image of God, for whose sake the fane was built, one of the pastophori or some other attendant on the temple approaches with a solemn and mysterious face, and putting aside the veil suffers you to attain a glimpse of the divinity. There you will behold a snake, a crocodile, or a cat, or some other beast, a fitter inhabitant of a cavern or a bog, than that of a temple. The priests of Egypt, always impostors, but once so celebrated, had now degenerated into a race of jugglers. Also the Chaldeans lived upon the fame of their fathers and upon their own base trickeries. The Brahmins or Brahmins, those priests of India, once so virtuous and so wise, they too had fallen. Once they had forbidden the shedding of so much as an insect's blood. One day in the year alone, at the feast of Jagam, they were authorized to sacrifice the flesh of a beast, and from this many had refrained from attending, unable to conquer their feelings of abhorrence. But now they had learnt from the fierce Scythians and from the Phoenicians who traded on their coast to sacrifice the wife upon her husband's pyre, to appease the gentle Brahma with the blood of men. And now the angels who had presided over them became savage demons who scourged them on to cruel penances, to lifetimes of suffering and famine. In the sacred groves where once the Brahman fathers had taught their precepts of love, men, emaciated, careworn, dying, wandered sadly, waiting for death as tortured prisoners wait for their liberty. But worse still, oh yes, much worse still, these wicked priests sought through the land for the most beautiful young women and trained them to dance in the temples and to entice the devotees to their arms with lustful attitudes and languishing looks, and with their voices, which mingled harmoniously with the golden bells suspended on their feet. They sang hymns to the gods in public, and in private enriched the treasures of the pagoda with their infamous earnings. And so a pure and simple religion was debased by the avarice and lewdness of its priests, till the temples became a den of thieves, until prostitution sat enthroned upon the altars of the gods. Greece and Rome, buried in sloth and luxury, did not escape this general contamination. The emblem of generation which Isis had bestowed upon the Egyptians, and which they had held in abstract reverence, had now obtained a prominent place in the festivals of these nations, as did the lingam in those of the Hindus. It was openly paraded in processions in the streets. It was worn by Roman nations in bracelets upon their arms. Look it up. The sacred festivals and mysteries which they had received from the Egyptians, and for which the women had been wont to prepare themselves by continence, and the men by fasting, were now mere vehicles for depravities of the lowest kind. Men were permitted to join the women in their worship of Bacchus, of Adonis, of the Bona Dea, and even of Priapus, and so dissolute did the Dionysia become that the civil powers, ladies and gentlemen, were compelled to interfere with those of religion, and the Bacchanalia were abolished by decree of the Roman Senate. It was so depraved that even the depravity of what we have studied, that were the men who occupied the great Senate of Rome, could not stand it. And the Jews, the chosen people of God, had not their religion changed? Had not God, weary with their sins, yielded them to captivity, scourged them with sorrow, menaced them with curses? They worshipped Baal Peor, the Priapus of Assyria. They sacrificed their children to Moloch. I'm not going to go deeper into particulars so degrading to human nature. I will rather invite you to follow me to a corner of the world where, at least for many ages, religion was preserved in its pristine purity, although misused, misdirected, and its power abused. But whose priests, through a barbarous soldiery, were received as martyrs before they had learned to be knaves upon this earth. It was an isolated spot, unknown to the world, in the earlier ages of vice. It became a great kingdom renowned for its power and for its luxuries from hemisphere to hemisphere. It abused its powers, and God eventually struck that empire down. But in its early days, it is worth studying. It was encircled by the blue waters of the German and Atlantic seas and abounded in the choicest gifts of nature. It was called the White Island from those cliffs which still frown so coldly upon Gaul, and the land of green hills from its verdant mountains. And Monday night, I'm going to take you to its shores by a roundabout venture, and I will show you its priests in their white robes and its warriors in the blue paint of war, and its virgins with their long and glossy yellow hair. By leading you back into the past and relate to you why this land was called Albion. Why Albion? And indeed, why Britain? doubtful many of you may be, what you've heard tonight is the truth. Many of you will ask, what is the purpose of this? Well, you're going to find out next week that the ancient religion that we're studying is still practiced today by many who hold a terrible power over us within our own government and in governments around the world. And it is this duplication of the misuse of the power and the ability to hold knowledge and technology and secrecy over the ignorant herds of sheeple, if you will, who are so trusting and so believing and so magnificently faithful that they willingly follow the Judas goat to the shearing pens and then ultimately to the slaughterhouse. And so I advise you to pay close attention to these lessons, and don't be stupid and don't be foolish, and don't think that you know all the answers, because there are very few of you in this listening audience who have ever bothered to study anything beyond the end of your own nose. Nor have you ever listened to any other than the liar who stands behind the pulpit of your church and preaches to you the doctrines that cause you to follow these Judas goats. And there's many more than one, believe me. Everything in this world that is happening today is happening because of four things, ladies and gentlemen: race, religion, power, and greed. Race, religion, power, and greed. If you do not understand the history of religion and how it manipulates and controls vast numbers of people on this earth, then you are one of those being manipulated and controlled.